was absolutely incredible for me to sit and listen to his wisdom and his knowledge. So I have a salt brand. It's called Oryx Desert Salt that I've been doing for 14 years. And I'm fascinated how much I'm constantly learning. So yes, Anthony, please introduce yourself.
Yes, a lot of you know, I'm Dr. Anthony de Pontes. I'm a homeopath, functional medicine practitioner, and acupuncturist in South Africa. And I've been doing online consulting, and I'm fully into the natural way of doing things. I'll just tell you, this just came into my head, a quick story. It was about in COVID, my wife got COVID, and she got it real bad, and I was trying everything, and it wasn't going as well as I had hoped. So I was a bit worried. She was like nearly on death's door. So I phoned a medical doctor friend of mine, and he was telling me, no, maybe you should bring her in to the hospital, etc., etc. And I thought about that, and I prayed about that, and I thought, no, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. Okay, I believe in what I'm doing, and I'm gonna stay with this. Anyway, my wife is still here today. We didn't go to the hospital, and she's fully recovered, no long COVID or any side effects. And that's like one thing where I say natural medicine is the way to go. And so I'm fully behind that. And this is part of why we're doing the salt, because you will see, or I hope you'll see from this presentation, how important salt is and how it's been, can I use the word, demonized? And it's almost in our DNA. When you born onto this planet and you start hearing the media and all the doctors and everything, I'm sure, maybe let's just do a poll. Maybe you can put into the chat box who thinks salt is bad, or it should be limited to such a degree. And I say this often. Maybe if you're standing in front of a doctor and you've got a chronic condition, and he will tell you, you've got to cut back on your salt, the hypertension is going to kill you, or you're going to have a heart attack, or your kidneys are going to go. Everybody, well, that puts a fear of God into everybody, and they quickly go back on that. That seems to be the norm that everybody moves out from. But if you are brave enough to kind of get a bird's eye view, is what I call it, and you will see that that is totally false. But the powers that be kind of keep us in this the ring of fear. And hopefully today, some of the information we share with you is going to help you to be able to break out of that. And I'm definitely certain that that's going to help you to get your vitality up. Those people that are very familiar with homeopathy, we often talk about the vital force, your vitality. And if your body is strong enough and it has got enough of that vitality, you are able to overcome chronic disease in an amazing way.
Absolutely. And Katrin, you think you've nailed it. Depends on the type of salt. Sea salt is very different from chemically produced NaCl. And I really believe that we should be differentiating table salt, which is sodium chloride with free flow chemicals and anti-caking agents, should not be called salt. So I think that was the first mistake. And so in some ways, when doctors say salt is bad for you, they should be saying table salt is really bad for you, but natural, unrefined, unprocessed salt, and really speaking about those them as two different products, and not all under the category of salt. But maybe Anthony, you can tell us why doctors are saying salt is linked to hypertension.
Okay, yes, let's start there. Actually, let's go further back into the 1600s or the 1800s. If you'd have a look, we didn't have refrigeration, so they used salt as a method of preserving their food. So actually, I think the stats go around about the 1800s. We were taking in about 7 times the amount of salt that we take today.
Wow,
all right.
much is
Now,
that?
here's where the crux came, and you might even laugh at what I'm going to tell you as not believing it, but around about the 1900s, 1907, the salt hypothesis came about. And really, to the untrained eye, the salt hypothesis makes so much sense. Salt, let me actually be more specific, sodium chemically draws water. All right. So the more salt you take, the more water your body's going to hold. That's going to increase the blood volume, which is going to increase the blood pressure. That makes total physiological sense. And from that little bit of physiology, they moved on to demonize salt. So what they did is they said, oh, we've got to limit your salt. And here is what they don't tell you. If you go and read all those studies, the little bits of irritating information that doesn't make the study make sense, which means that the study doesn't get its full emphasis, and maybe there's a certain financial interest involved, so it would get shelved, so they don't put that in. So incorrect or improper interpretation of those studies. So what actually they found was they started to demonize salt, and they said, well, we have to limit our salt. And that's where the medical profession got that jive happening, where everybody is wanting to limit salt. So let's just look at a bit of the physiology. If you have a low salt diet, your blood volume is going to go down, and your less blood volume, you're going to be maybe a bit dizzy, fatigued, and your cognition is going to reduce, and your body's going to go into a state of stress. It's going to release the stress hormones. And this is the reason why we say salt is so detrimental, because it puts extra stress on the kidneys. So what they did was I think they limited it to, 1,800 milligrams of salt a day. That's a real low salt diet. I think it's almost impossible to do that. If you look at how our foods are going, or if you are eating foods that are refined carbohydrates, they put a lot of salt into that. So it's very difficult to have that low salt diet. Then the World Health Organization came out and they said, no, let's peg that number at about 2,000 to 2,300 milligrams of salt a day. That's about a teaspoon of salt. Now let's go a bit further into the research. So what they found is you have these hazardous events, which means that you could have some cardiac events, some brain events. Remember, salt is a big player in brain health and brain vitality. So at about 2,000, 2,300 milligrams of salt a day, those hazardous cardiac or brain events were very limited. So we go, yes, that's good. But what they found then, when you upped it to between 4.5 and 5.5 or 6,000 milligrams a day, that low amount of cardiac and neurological events reduced even more. Then when you went between 7 and 12,000 milligrams a day, then those hazardous events started to come back. But these are not things that they tell you, and it's very deeply hidden in all the studies. That is totally glossed over, and they've just got what they call the salt hypertension hypothesis. Now, listen, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said to you, salt draws water, water expands the blood volume, and because of that, the blood volume gets bigger, and so now we've got hypertension. But here's the thing. If you have a look, if you do that, it takes about 75 minutes for that blood volume to expand and then for you to get the hypertensive symptom. But within that 75 minutes, the salt has already been cleared by the kidneys. Oh, you say, yes, but salt is very damaging to the kidneys. That's only if the body has to keep reabsorbing salt. So then when you look at, especially in renal failure, they limit salt tremendously. When you limit the salt like that, you've got the lower blood volume, the heart has to work harder, there's more hypertension. And this is what they found. If we look more at the hypertensive hypothesis, everybody is so scared, everybody is put on hypertensive or antihypertensive medication. They actually found that, or let me go back. So, like I said to you, that hypothesis looks very good and very physiologically sound, okay? More salt, more water is attracted, etc. But here's the thing, when they did that, the test groups took 18 times more salt than you do in your normal daily use of salt. Okay, well, obviously you're going to have some issues. All right, so really it must be taken into context, and you'll see there's no problems. Like we said, in the 1800s they were taking 7 times the amount of salt. Also, if you have got sufficient salt, and if we look at what does salt do, salt is actually indicated for regulating your blood pressure. That's the function of salt. In homeopathy, there is a remedy called NatMur. Even if you want to look at the tissue salts, the indication for NatMur on the tissue salt basis is it regulates hypertension. So it'll bring down the hypertension. You give some sodium, which is the NatMur, and you give some potassium, which could be like another tissue salt, CaliMur, and in so many cases, it will regulate the hypertension down to normal tension. So these things are not seen by doctors. The other thing that is very prevalent today is our stress levels, which means our bodies release a lot more cortisol. And what does cortisol do? It drops the sodium. So they also found that people who have got regular or normal blood pressure, 80% of those people are not salt sensitive to induce hypertension, which means they can take extra salt and they don't get hypertension in 80% of those people. Then in people that are pre-hypertensive, it goes down to 75%. So 75% of those people, if they take a high salt diet, they don't get hypertension. Remember what I said to you? That the body has these self-regulating mechanisms. Your autonomic nervous system will regulate it with the hormone from the adrenal glands called aldosterone. And there it would hold the salt if you've got too little, and if you've got too much, it'll just let it go up the kidneys. And here's the kicker. 55% of people who have got hypertension increase their salt, and 55% of those people don't have their hypertension exacerbated by the salt. Now, let's take a look further. Let's zoom out. Okay, we've just been focusing on the salt or on the sodium, all right, because of the physiology. And remember, that physiology makes sense if you take it in isolation. Of the salt plus water increases the blood volume. Now, if we zoom out a bit, it's not just sodium. Sodium doesn't work by itself in the body. It works together with potassium. So in a lot of these studies, that proved, in inverted commas, that proved that salt caused hypertension, those patients were low in potassium. Okay? Those patients were also ingesting sugar, and it was found that the sugar was aggravating that through the insulin dependent pathway. So that's how salt got demonized. It's got nothing to do with salt. Salt is, I mean, we use it in our daily lives everywhere. Our tears are salty. All our cells are bathed in salt. It keeps our brains working well. If you don't have enough salt, you know, have you ever heard of hydrocephalus? It's like swelling of the brain or swelling in the head. Okay, that's often when you've got too little salt, that can happen. So many migraine headaches, that, you know, twice a month or whatever, or once a month when I'm close to my menses, I get these headaches. Too little salt. Just take some salt and it's going to rebalance the intra and extracellular fluid in the body. I just want to show you quickly, if I can, there's something called the sodium-potassium pump in the body. It's found in every single cell of the body. If I can show you a picture, it'll help for you to understand it a lot better. All right, can you see that all?
Yes, thank you.
Yes?
Thank you.
Okay, so this is actually a cell membrane. So if we have a look here, this is the cell membrane. So if there's anything on this side or on that side, it can't get in. And then we get here, this is the sodium-potassium pump. It's a protein that expends energy to move, as you can see here, this is inside the cell. It needs energy. There we go. ATP is energy, adenine triphosphate. to push the sodium, and see there's three sodiums out the cell, and from the blood space, it takes in 2 atoms of potassium. Okay. And that's what happens in every cell of our body. If we look at the muscles, if we look at the nerves, to get a nerve to fire, this is what has to happen. To get a muscle to fire, that is what has to happen. The sodium has to go out and the potassium has to come in. Sodium is essential for life. And if you don't have enough potassium, that's when you're going to get the imbalance in the water, and that's when you're going to start to get the hypertension. If you look at hair tissue mineral analysis, Dr. Paul Eck proved that so long ago, and one of the patterns on hair tissue mineral analysis that is so common today is what they call a low sodium to potassium ratio, and that is when people are burnt out. And I mean, I know I'm taking a stab here at the amount, but if I just look at in my clinic, I can say between 70 to 80% of people are burnt out. All right. They don't have proper regulation of the sodium potassium pump. And that's because the autonomic nervous system is not regulating properly. If I explain it to you in another way, if I'm in the same room as you now, and I'm getting a bit physical with you, and I say I'm going to punch you, and I take my fist back and I bring it forward to punch you, and you don't see it coming, and you wake up on the floor because I knocked you out. That can be an explanation of how your autonomic nervous system is not regulating properly, because you're not able to see my fist coming towards you and then take evasive action. The dysregulation in your body, right? As opposed to someone who sees that coming, is able to duck and survive the onslaught, right? Now take that back to our lives. We are dysregulated. We are not able to survive the onslaughts of life. And this is how the chronic disease will come in. If we look at, this is how often you might get your hypertension, because your body is not regulating properly. That sodium potassium pump is not working properly.
So Anthony, it would make sense then as well with table salt, because it's been demineralized, it's been stripped of all the goodness, and what's left is the sodium chloride. And they also then add in anti-caking and free flow chemicals to stop the water from absorbing moisture. But if it's just sodium chloride without the potassium, and also with other chemicals to stop it from absorbing moisture, that's going to cause havoc as well.
Yeah, it's you know, if you use table salt, you're going to get your hypertension. You've got that imbalance in the potassium. Okay. Obviously, there's other factors as well. Maybe you're not eating enough vegetables, you're not getting enough potassium in as well. But so there are blinding factors that leave you totally exposed to chronic disease. And these are the factors that your doctor is telling you, no, you don't need to, you know, you should eat a low salt diet. Don't go in the sun. Cholesterol is bad. These are all what I would call medical blunders. And most of the time, those medical blunders that have arrived on the scene due to greed and from the pharmaceutical industry. So I know I'm a bit outspoken in that, but the body is the most amazing organism to heal itself. You've just got to give it the right, can I call it the right environment? It was Dr. Bruce Lipton. He was a researcher, and he said there's only about 5% tendency to have a genetic problem. The rest of it is what they call an epigenetic issue, which means your environment causes the problem. So, you know, I say I'm going to get hypertension because my father had hypertension. Okay. Well, I am eating the wrong diet. I'm using the wrong salt. Okay. I'm eating too much sugar. It's my environment. If I change the environment, I don't have to get the diabetes. The epigenetic switch is what turns that gene on or off. And this is what us as, can I call it as humans or lay people are not taught. We're just led by the nose with the medical profession. And I'm not beating the medical profession down. It's definitely got its place. But if you're looking for health and vitality, you can't go that route.
It really is about the balance and taking back our power in terms of understanding more around the body, as opposed to these generic statements that come from the medical world. There's a cardiac researcher, Dr. Nicol Antonio, and he's got a book called The Salt Fix. And
Yes.
I loved what his sort of embodied statement was the wrong white crystal got the bad rap. That, you know, a lot of what the issues that we are seeing and experiencing is because because sugar is so prevalent in our diet, and the sugar industry also put the focus onto salt because they didn't want to take the responsibility, and so salt was also used then as sort of a scapegoat to some degree.
Yeah. So Sam, tell us about, let me be a devil's advocate here. Tell us about, now we've spoken about table salt, or what I'd call derogatory salt, or something that is actually not supposed to be in your body. Tell us about the salt that should be in our body and why it should be in our body, and educate us there.
Thank you. The other thing that happened is, so table salt came around 1910, 1911. And this was also the start of the sort of industrial era where people were needed in factories to just do a very menial job. And Anthony mentioned it previously, that salt is so essential for our brain function. And if you're feeling brain fogged, so in my glass of water, I've got a little grind of salt in it because it turns it into an electrolyte. So it helps, the neurons need that medium of a good quality salt in order to fire properly. And so it was also the start of the convenience era. So table salt is actually industrial salt, PVC, maybe the casing of my power bank. The C stands for chloride. So salt goes into plastic, it goes into paint, it goes into a lot of industries. And so they were creating salt in these monumental, vast quantities. And of course, they needed it to pour freely. And so that was when they started putting the anti-caking and free flow chemicals. So if anyone's from the US, they'll know Morton's, and it says, see how it pours. And in South Africa, we have another brand that says, see how it runs. And it seemed really convenient. However, one of salt's intrinsic value to the body is that it absorbs water and it helps us stay hydrated. So it means then that people wouldn't have been as sharp and thinking, but that was okay because they needed people to just do menial jobs in the factories. Then in around 1970, Jacques Delorange started a company called Celtic Sea Salt, and he was a naturopath, and he understood that we weren't getting this balanced salt with the 75 plus minerals and trace elements. So all salts have between 65 and 85 minerals and trace elements. They're obviously in a very unique proportion. So each salt is entirely unique to another in its proportion. A beautiful chef that I work with currently has about 230 different salts in his collection. So Jacques managed to switch many people onto sea salt, understanding that was balance, and that was how, that was the original salt that we were supposed to be eating. And then Himalayan salt came about, and because Himalayan salt is pink, there were so many ladies who fell in love with it. It's so pretty, they wanted it on their table, and it was touted as a mineral-rich salt. And I really believe that it was so essential for the switch again from table salt to Himalayan salt. It's a global brand. But the sad thing around Himalayan now is that because it's in such high demand, it is dynamited out. And some Himalayan salts have been tested with certain chemical residue because of the blast and because of the dynamite. And that's a whole nother conversation to have with Anthony another time, because there's actually a homeopathic remedy for gunpowder. So you don't want to be having gunpowder as a homeopathic dose if you're not needing it. It's unfortunately also not a renewable resource or sustainable. And the communities that are providing the Himalayan salt, they're around 350, and they keep undercutting each other on price to see if they can get more business. And they're currently getting paid around $4 per ton. So that's not sustainable either. So a colleague that I knew about 16 years back, he was looking for a food product that had a spiritual quality to it. And then he ended up meeting the daughter of this incredible salt pan. And I'm going to share my screen. So this is the beautiful, so we're in Southern Africa. Well, I'm supposed to be living on that little point. Anthony is around about down here at the very, very bottom of Africa as well. So this is the Kalahari Desert. It is 900,000 square kilometers or 9 million hectares. So in the US, this region is about 1.5 times the size of Texas. And if you're in the UK, it's about 20 times the size of Britain, just to give you a sense of scale. So Uppington is the closest town, and it is 175 or 250 kilometers away. And it's a 2.5-hour drive, and there's absolutely nothing but sand between the town and the salt pan. I stayed at a lodge about 5 kilometers from the pan, and they have to truck in their fresh water 250 kilometers or 175 miles. So because there's no fresh water, the area is essentially uninhabitable. So here there's this 5,000 hectare or 50 square kilometer salt pan, and they discovered underground a 55 million ton salt lake. When they did tests to see if this was a viable source to use as a source for salt, they discovered 3 subterranean rivers, and they flow through ancient rock strata that has been tested at 280 million years old. These rivers flow through this ancient rock strata. It picks up the vital minerals and trace elements together with the salt, and we draw it up onto the salt pan. And what's fascinating is that it is 110% saturated. So sea salt is only 20 to 30% saturation. So it takes about a year for it to reach saturation and for it to start crystallizing. However, when we draw up the salt water from underground onto the pan, in summer at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 4750 degrees Celsius, it crystallizes in only 4 weeks. So if you can imagine this salt water lying on this pan in one lunar cycle in 4 weeks, under the stars, the hot African sun, the desert wind, it crystallizes into pure white crystals. And we harvest that, and we bottle that. So we are literally bottling the beauty and the elements of the Kalahari together with this natural salt. We add nothing and we take nothing away. That's just another picture of the beautiful salt pan.
Sam, if I could ask you this, so you don't add anything to it. How do you get it to run? Or is that a fallacy that you had to add a free-flowing agent to it?
It is. So predominantly, so the one product we have, let me see if I can undo my, anyway, I'll show it to you just now. So the only process that we do is we put this raw coarse salt from the salt pan through a sieve, and we get 2 to 4 millimeter crystals that we put into a bottle so that you can grind it. We do in South Africa, not internationally as much. We do have a fine salt, and all that we do is we crush it. So we refuse to add the free flow chemicals into it. So if you were to have a plate of refined processed table salt and a plate of Oryx desert salt, within a couple of days, Oryx will become wet. because it's absorbing the moisture. The table salt can sit there through winter with the rain and it won't absorb any moisture. And that's actually, quite an obvious way of showing what it would be doing in your bodies. The one table salt not absorbing moisture and Oryx desert salt absorbing moisture. So the one, there's another situation and a shocking fact with regards to the oceans. And predominantly salt does come from the oceans. It's sea salt. There are a couple of other brands in America that are from underground lakes. It's rock salt. But in the last 50 years, the pollution and the contamination in the oceans has built up. So currently, there 90 to 95% of sea salt has been tested with microbead plastic in it, because of the amount of plastic that has been dumped into the oceans, and it breaks down into its minute particle, which is a microbead, and that has been tested in sea salt. And then I met a marine biologist in the US last year, and he harvests oysters in Ireland, and he discovered in the oysters, he did some testing and discovered contraceptives and opioids. So oysters are the filters of the ocean. And if you think 360 million Americans, how many of them are on a prescription drug or a contraceptive or an antidepressant or some prescription drug? A lot of that we pee out and it ends up in the oceans. And then the cruise liners dump 1 billion tons of sewage every single year into the oceans. So, and Anthony would be able to speak more to this, but from a homeopathic perspective, when you draw up salt water, sea salt, in order to create salt, you're also getting in everything else that is in that seawater. And even if it is an essence of like a homeopathic dose, I've become a salt snob, and I personally don't want sea salt in my cooking or on my food. And Oryx just comes from this incredibly beautiful source where when we draw up that salt water onto the pan, it has not been touched by human hands. Just in fact, let me just show you a picture of what the product looks like. So this is so Oryx is this beautiful gazelle. And the reason I called it Oryx, many years ago, I did a 120-kilometer walk, a 75-mile walk through the Namib Desert, which is in Namibia, one of the neighboring countries of South Africa, and where the Kalahari is also in Namibia. And I had close encounters with the Oryx. And so some years later, when I had the opportunity to brand the salt, I called it Oryx Desert Salt. And then I discovered they can go their whole lives without drinking water, but they can't go weeks without licking salt. It is so essential for them with the minerals and trace elements. And because the salt helps them stay hydrated in the harsh conditions of the Kalahari. One of my COVID blessings was we lost 70% of sales. And so I pitched Oryx to Whole Foods in America. And we launched there about 2.5 years ago. So Oryx is available in Whole Foods. And yeah, I will email you some information around this. I've given you quite a lot of facts so that you know a little bit more. The other aspect of any grinder just to be aware of, because some of you, I don't remember if it was Katrine, somebody was from Grenada, and I know it's not there. So some of you might not have access to Oryx salt, but Celtic sea salt, I know I actually met the owner of Celtic sea salt, Selena, and I know that she is very particular about her source. So I believe that Celtic sea salt would be a pure source as well. I know that Redmond's real salt comes from underground. It isn't a renewable resource, but it wouldn't have the pollution in it. But just be aware of the grinder that you're buying. So I might stop sharing my screen here. I think I've pretty much shared most of the information with you. But so Oryx has this white mechanism inside, that's the grinding mechanism, and that is ceramic in the Oryx Desert Salt grinder. Whereas the other grinders that the research that I've done, both in the UK and the US, all of the other grinders are plastic or polycarb. So rather buy yourself a good quality grinder like a Le Creuset or a Peugeot, and put your quality salt into that grinder. Because if you're using a grinder off shelf that's plastic, that is going to be grinding plastic into your food, which you really don't want to do. So yeah, those of you in the US, we will oh, thank you to Carol, who somebody put the Oryx Desert Salt website on. We will email you information. We'll also email you a code for you to get a discount in the US. And then email me back and let's make a plan for those of you who are not in the US. South Africa, hello South Africans. I will send you a code as well. So that you can get Oryx into your kitchens. So I call it a guilt-free salt. And it's so interesting what Anthony said. 100 years ago, before electricity and fridges, we were pickling our vegetables in salt. We were preserving all of our meat in salt. And so we were taking in so much more salt than we were now, but it was all an unprocessed, unrefined, natural salt, and not the sodium chloride that all processed foods, breads, they're all using a table salt because it's the cheap version. So if you have table salt in your kitchen, please put it underneath your sink where you have all of your other chemicals, and use it on your red wine stains if you happen to kick over your glass of red wine on a Friday evening. But honestly, the $2 or the 10 Rand or the £2 that you paid for it isn't worth it for your body. You'll end up spending a lot more on medical bills. So rather put that aside and go have a look for an unrefined and a natural sea salt. And if you can get your hands on Oryx, because of the beautiful source, I recommend that. So thank you. Adding iodine to salt came around in 1942, around after the war, or around the time of the war. Because the food source was so isolated, people weren't getting food from different areas, and so goiters became a problem. So the reason it was added to salt was not because salt needs iodine, it's because salt was a carrier. They could have put it into sugar, they could have put it, but sugar obviously was a luxury then, where salt was necessary. So no, we don't add iodine, but you would be better off if you do a test and you are needing iodine, is to rather buy yourself a good quality iodine from a health shop and just put a drop into, you could put it into your salt if you wanted to, because you're using it all the time. But so Celtic would probably have a higher iodine content than Himalayan would do. But I think from the fact that Himalayan's dynamited and it's not renewable, they rather use Oryx Desert Salt or Celtic salt. So I wouldn't be able to give you the ratio of iodine in sea salt versus Himalayan. So you even get iodine in, so iodine also, there is iodine in the earth. So if you're eating any fish, you're not needing to supplement your diet with iodine. You would get it in the fish that you're eating. So I think it would be better to check your iodine and see whether you are needing to supplement or not, rather than relying on your salt, because you would be getting it from other food products that you'd be eating. If you're buying from various supermarkets, food is very global now. We not just eating from a small area. So actually I bought Mark Kolansky's World History of Salt, which I'm going to start reading. So Linda, I would be able to answer that better in a couple of weeks. A lot of the main highway routes, like across Africa and other places in the world, are salt routes, because salt was the first traded commodity and was so necessary. So there is salt in every single country besides Belgium. So there are sources of salt besides the oceans. And I guess people would have been trading salt continuously, and they would have known where they were able to get. In South Africa, there are a couple of different regions where you can get salt that is not from the ocean. So I hope that answers your question. So it's something that you would need to get used to. So initially you could just actually put 1 grind, and then after a while you could increase that until you don't ever want it to be too salty. But 1 or 2 grinds or 3 grinds into a liter will shift that water from into being an electrolyte for your body, and your body being able to absorb that water more readily because of the minerals and because of the salt in it. There's an excellent article on our website called "Drink Less Water, Eat More Salt." And that's under the blog section if you wanted to go in and get a little bit more detail around that.
Like the Oryx, Sam. Less water, more
Yeah,
salt.
exactly.
So just a little comment here, we have been bludgeoned to death with drink more water, drink more water. I've got a diagnostic machine called an S-Tech, and it reads the amount of water in the body. So we've been taught that, we're 70% water, all right? But now the water has to be in the cells. And because of all the radiation we exposed to, the inflammation that we exposed to, the water is in the wrong place. So actually, all these people drink water and they say, oh, I drank my 2 liters today, or whatever they're saying, but they actually are still dehydrated.
Interesting.
And that might be a conundrum to many people, because they think I'm drinking water, but it's not being absorbed into the cells. So that's the importance of having the right electrolytes. And actually, when you do tests on the cells, the electric, what they call the millivolt charge on a cell is minus 70 millivolts. That's when it is at optimum. And what we're seeing is that the millivolt readings on generally on patients today, and this is one of the reasons why they are tired, why they are getting ill more quickly, cognitively they are malfunctioning, is because that millivolt in the cell has been reduced. So they are more, can we call it, it's more positive. And when you reach a certain positivity on that millivolt reading, that's a breeding ground for cancer. And I know I've kind of like just spiked it into another direction. We weren't talking about this, but that's just physiology. All right. So it is really important to get your electrolytes balanced.
Absolutely. And you can do that daily with a good quality salt. So yeah, please all make a commitment to yourself to put your table salt out of your kitchens and not to use that again, please. Celtic salt So recently Celtic salt has got a lot of attention because of an amazing doctor, Barbara O'Neill, who was talking about magnesium. And she's been using Celtic salt for many years, and she's got a huge following on TikTok and YouTube. And so her post went viral. And I'm really quite excited about it because it's creating awareness of the quality of salt that you're eating. It's become very expensive. I cannot vouch for the source where it comes from. I can absolutely vouch for the source where Oryx Desert Salt comes from, and how it's it's literally these beautiful pure white crystals are from the salt pan and untouched, and unpolluted and uncontaminated. So if that's what you're able to get in the meantime, absolutely. And then when you're able to get Oryx salt, then and something to do when you are able to get yourself a bottle of Oryx is to grind some on your hand and have a taste, and then to taste whatever else you have in your kitchen, any other brand, Celtic or Himalayan, or and taste the difference. Oryx has a very beautiful taste profile. It opens up all of the taste buds in your mouth. So it's like a flavor enhancer as well as it being the salt and making a difference to your food. So one way to look at salt as well is if you don't cook with salt, you're going to notice the difference. It's the smallest ingredient in any recipe, but it actually has the biggest impact on the final taste of your meal. And salt as well is the smallest ingredient you're going to put into your body, but the quality of your salt is also going to have a massive impact on your health. So look at it in that way. Does anyone have any other questions?
I think people have got to start changing their perception and what they're reading and what they're listening to, because it's too easy to get pulled into the medical route and the medical model and the medical beliefs. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Dr. James de Nicola Antonio on Instagram is a super knowledgeable on salt. He's got the book The Salt Fix. Who Linda mentioned Dr. Batman, I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, Batman Helige's books, and I've got a couple of his articles actually on the Oryx Desert Salt website. If you look under the About section, there's For Your Health, and there are quite a lot of articles, some videos, interviews, book recommendations if you want to go into more of the research. And when you're on the website, on the front page is a short little documentary. We went up to the salt pan last year, and there's drone footage to show you the beautiful source where this comes from. And yeah, it's very special. So have a look when you've got the time. I'm here in the UK working with a distributor to launch in October. So please follow us on Instagram and I will keep you posted. We'll be looking at supplying farm shops and delis and garden shops. So Christina, thank you. Yes, by October it will be available.
So actually, we were talking a bit earlier, you need to do about 6,000 milligrams of salt a day. And as I say that, I'm just going to put a caution on there. I don't know your case. I don't know your state of health. So this is not medical advice, but you can go to that level. I don't know what type of chronic medication you're on, but to my understanding, you're going to start to rebalance your physiology. You're going to start to urinate more. You will see. So now, do I put it in every glass? You need to look to see. You need about 6,000 milligrams a day, which would be about three teaspoons. Okay, taking into account when certain foods that you're eating, but have also got sodium in. But I think a good rule of thumb would be a teaspoon in your liter of water, or maybe you want to do it in 2 liters of water, that type of thing, and drink that throughout the day.
So we have a brother company. Let me see if I've got a sample. It's called Revive. And it's an electrolyte sachet, and this is 1,000 milligrams of salt, which would be a gram, 200 milligrams of potassium and 100 milligrams of magnesium. And I drink probably around 2 of these a day. So I put 1 of these into a liter of water. And then that's how I drink. When I travel, I drink a little bit more than that, especially when I'm flying. So jet lag is mostly caused by dehydration. So I usually drink about 4 sachets when I take an international flight. And these are available in South Africa. In America, there's one called LMNT. In the UK, this is called Repower. But there are various good quality brands with the sodium, the potassium, and the magnesium balance. This particular brand, the Revive or Repower, is powered by Oryx desert salt. So the sodium ingredient in here is Oryx desert salt. So we know the source is good. But yeah, if that answers your question, about 1,000 milligrams in a liter of water. Yes, we do Oryx pepper, and it comes from small-scale farmers in Madagascar. So supporting communities there. And with all of our sales, we give a percentage back to the Kalahari Sand communities in the Kalahari Desert. So we're always ensuring that we're giving back and making a difference. So we've had an hour of your time. We so appreciate you all giving up and joining us to learn a little bit more about salt. Thank you. I've put my email address, but we will email you more information. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send back, and we'd be happy to send you the recording of this as well. So thank you all very much. What is that called in the US? So Carol, we don't have this in the US yet. It will be coming in the next year or so. But otherwise, in the meantime, just put your Oryx desert salt into your water from Whole Foods. But we will send you a code for you to purchase on Amazon, so that you can get a discount code from there. Stay salty.
Right.
Thank you, NK.
You go
Thank
well.
you, Anthony, for your valuable
Then.
insights and information. And
Perfect.
yeah, take care, everyone. Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye.